Reggie here, your friendly neighborhood bodybuilder and comic book collector, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to spend some time talking about Blue Ocean Comics. And what I will endeavor to do is to identify two books that I believe are in Blue Ocean territory. I'll provide you with the rationale for why I believe that these books have some potential, and I'll also cite some market data for you, specifically trying to call out where I would actually spend my money on these books, again, based upon the market data. Now, what I will tell you is that this video is not intended to tell you to go spend your money, despite that intro. It is really designed to highlight for you a couple of books that I think have some potential. You still need to evaluate whether the rationale and the data that I've provided actually makes sense, but more importantly, you have to decide whether this book actually fits with your overall strategy and goal for your collection. If it doesn't, if either one of those things don't make sense, then don't do anything. Just enjoy this video for its entertainment purposes only. So the first book that we're going to talk about technically isn't a single book. It is actually two books. And I am specifically talking about Uncanny XMen issue number 282 and issue 283. Issue number 282 is the cameo and first cover appearance for Bishop. Issue 283 is actually his first full appearance and also a cover appearance. Now, why do I think that these two books are worth checking out? Well, I'll honestly say that I think one is better than the other, but I do want to mention both of them and then you can kind of sort it out. But everyone knows that the X-Men are coming to the MCU. There is no doubt about it. That is going to happen. Now, when you take a step away from that, part of my thinking is that Kevin Feige may want to do something that is different from what was done in the Fox movies. The Fox movies used your core characters, your Cyclops, your Jean Grey, your Wolverine, right? Those were like some of the core characters. And Kevin may want to avoid using those characters. And so if you look at that core team and basically say that that core team will be introduced, but maybe not right away. I don't know whether that's true or not. But if you ask, what is the next level of X-Men hero that Kevin could tap into? As you run down the list, Bishop might be one of those characters that you land on. Now, what's great about Bishop is that not only does he allow Kevin to move away from talking about that core X-Men team, it also allows him to check a very important box. And that box is the diversity box. There is a lot of noise out there about the importance of diversity. Bishop is very much that. He is a mutant, he's an X-Men, but he's also a diverse character. Now, in addition to that, Bishop is not a new character. This is not a character that was just created last week. Bishop has actually been around for quite some time. He was in the cartoon back in the 90s that we all watched as young adults or kids or whatever you happen to have been back then or watched on YouTube if you're much, much younger than that. But he is a character that has been around. So there is a nostalgic play here as well. And I think that that could, again, be something that Kevin Feige wants to tap into. There's a couple of things that Bishop could potentially help him to do because he's a time traveler. There is some play there with time travel, and we know that there is this whole multi-universal thing that is happening right now in the MCU. Could work for Bishop. Who knows? So the other thing to mention here is that when you step away from those core characters and you start to look at the next tier of heroes that could be leveraged, you will see that Bishop's first appearance is actually relatively inexpensive. It's certainly cheap compared to the first appearance of your Cyclops, your Storm, your Wolverine, etc., those are pretty pricey. Bishop, as a secondary hero, not expensive at all. So to that point, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the market data. And we will start specifically with X-Men 282. This book presently has an FMV of $210 at a 9.8. And presently, you can actually get this book for less than that FMV. And yes, there was a sale that was well above FMV, but that book was actually for a newsstand 9.8 of Bishop's cameo appearance. And I hope that that person is pleased with that purchase, because that is a lot of money. By and large, you should be able to acquire this book graded at a 9.8 for less than FMV. When we take a look at X-Men 283, the first full appearance and also cover, this book can be acquired for well below its FMV, which currently sits at about $200. Presently, this book is selling somewhere around the $90 mark, more or less. And so to that point, if I had an opportunity to pick up one of these books, I would go 282 versus 283 all day, and I would go with the 9.8. Now, let's say that you don't want to spend 9.8 money for whatever reason. You can always take it down to a 9.6. 9.6 in either one of these books is still a fantastic book. And it's not a bad way to go if you want to step away from the 9.8. There is a precipitous drop off in the prices for these books, for both of them, as you go from a 9.8 to a 9.6. So at a 9.6, it becomes relatively cheap, especially because these are graded books. But again, if it were me, I go 9.8, I go 282 and call it a day. So the next book that I want to talk about in many ways actually builds upon the rationale that was provided in the previous example. In this case, we are actually talking about a villain instead of a hero. And I'm going to get to my rationale here in just a moment, but I'm specifically talking about X-Men issue number 221, the first full appearance of Mr. Sinister. And I think that this book is really cool if you can pick it up. And I think that it's a cool book for several reasons. To my point with the first example, Kevin Feige may want to go in a different direction. He may want to leverage a villain that has not already been referenced in previous movies. So far, we have seen villains like Apocalypse and Magneto time and time again. Mr. Sinister is a fantastic villain that has ties to lots of heroes and also lots of villains, including Apocalypse and the Marauders. And so there is a way for them to bring in Sinister and then have him touch and introduce lots of different heroes and villains, because this character has been around for a while, but also given the nature of this character with the genetic manipulation and stuff that he likes to do to mutants, this could be a really awesome villain to actually introduce and to give us a different type of story versus what we've seen with Magneto and Apocalypse in the Fox movies. So when we look at the data for X-Men number 221, this one is a little bit tougher. And I say that because I think that people are indeed starting to pay attention to Mr. Sinister, partly because of what has been happening in the Dawn of X books. With Mr. Sinister, I think folks are kind of looking at him and people may be asking the question of whether he is potentially going to be the villain that ultimately comes to the MCU. And for that reason, for a while, a 9.8, which has an FMV of $300, books were actually selling above that FMV for a while. The most recent sale is actually below FMV, which I think is really good, but the comic is still selling for $300, which is a nice chunk of money. But to that point, if you decide that you do not want to pick up the 9.8, you have an opportunity to actually go for a 9.6. And a 9.6 actually is not a bad grade for this book. And when you look at the data associated with the 9.6, you can see that that book has an FMV of around $120. But most recently, that book is actually selling for well below that FMV. So again, not a bad way to go if you decide that the 9.8 is too rich for your blood and you decide to go after the 9.6. It's not a bad way to go. I am very thankful that I actually have a copy of this book that I picked up probably 6 or 7 months ago at a 9.8. I have a few raw copies of it. And then I also have several raw copies of X-Men 282 and 283. So in the spirit of transparency, I kind of offer that information up to you guys. But by and large, none of these books are bad books to pick up. If you are a fan of the X-Men, you're a fan of Bishop or the 90s cartoon or Mr. Sinister, these are decent books to actually check out. So with that said, I'm going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if indeed you did, I want to encourage you to leave a comment behind, hit the thumbs up button, and we will mix it up in the comment section. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
Ooh.